I focused on my own life and business, which had been doing really well since the divorce. I'd thrown myself into work during the separation, and it had paid off in ways I hadn't expected. Gavin called for our regular check-in and told me my property portfolio had increased in value by 30% over the past year. The downtown building where Natalie lived was worth significantly more than I'd paid for it, and my other investments were all performing above expectations. Gavin suggested I consider buying another building downtown while the market was good. I told him to send me some options to review. The revenge of living well was proving to be the sweetest kind. I had a successful business, financial security, and peace in my life that I'd never had during my marriage. A week later, Ashley reached out through social media again. She sent me a long message thanking me for talking to Ryan and helping him see the family dynamics clearly. She said their couples counseling was going really well now that Natalie wasn't controlling everything behind the scenes. Ashley seemed genuinely happy in her message, more confident than when I'd met her at the coffee shop. She said Ryan was becoming the person she'd always sensed he could be, and she was grateful I'd pushed back against Natalie's manipulation, even though it had cost me my marriage. She promised they were building something real together now, something based on honest communication, instead of Natalie's orchestration. I read her message and felt genuinely happy for them both. A few weeks later, I attended a property investors networking event downtown, one of those evening mixers with wine and name tags where people talk about market trends and zoning laws. I went mostly for the business connections but ended up having actual fun conversations with several people who understood the investment side of real estate. One person asked if I wanted to grab drinks after the event ended, and I said yes without overthinking it. We went to a bar nearby and talked for 2 hours about everything except real estate, and when I got home that night I realized I was actually ready to date again. The divorce had hurt, but I'd healed more than I thought. Life was moving forward in good ways I hadn't expected. Waverly called the next week with her monthly report and mentioned that Natalie had been a model tenant for 3 months straight. No issues, no complaints from neighbors, rent paid early every single time. I asked if Natalie had caused any problems at all, and Waverly said no. Everything was completely professional and clean. I wondered if losing control over the situation had actually forced Natalie to behave better, or if she was just biding her time and planning something. Either way, the professional relationship was working exactly as it should. Natalie was following her lease terms, and I was staying completely out of her personal life. Thea called a few days after that and invited me to a small family gathering she was hosting, making it very clear that Emily and Natalie would not be there. I was surprised but agreed to come. When I arrived at her house that Saturday, I met several of Ryan's extended family members I'd never known during the marriage. The biggest surprise was meeting Ryan's father for the first time. He'd left when Ryan was young, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and I'd always assumed he was completely out of the picture. He was there with his second wife, a kind woman who taught high school math, and he had a completely different perspective on the family dynamics than anyone else I'd talked to. Ryan's father pulled me aside after dinner and apologized for not being present to protect Ryan from Natalie's manipulation growing up. He admitted he left partly because Emily was using the children as emotional weapons during their marriage, and Natalie had learned to do the same thing by watching her mother. He said he tried to maintain contact with both kids after the divorce, but Emily and Natalie made it impossible, poisoning Ryan against him with lies and manipulation. Every visit became a battle. Every phone call ended with Ryan crying and confused, until eventually he just stopped trying because he thought he was hurting Ryan more by staying involved. He said watching Natalie destroy my marriage was like watching history repeat itself, and he felt guilty for not warning me or Ryan about the patterns he'd seen. The gathering gave me closure I didn't know I needed. Understanding that the dysfunction ran much deeper than just Natalie's jealousy or Emily's coldness helped me see the whole picture. This family had been broken for decades, and I'd walked into something that was never going to work no matter how hard I tried. I was grateful I got out when I did, before years more of manipulation and pain. Ryan was there with Ashley, and they seemed genuinely happy together, now that they were building something real without Natalie controlling every interaction. They sat close together and actually talked to each other instead of performing for an audience, and Ashley looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. I started dating the person I met at the networking event, taking things slow but enjoying the connection we were building. They knew about my divorce and the complicated family situation because I was honest from the start, and they were respectful of my boundaries in ways that felt completely different from my marriage. We went to dinner, saw movies, took walks around the city, and everything felt healthy and normal in a way my relationship with Ryan never did. There was no family drama, no hidden manipulation, no walking on eggshells. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing if something good could develop. Waverly called again when Natalie's lease was approaching its end, and confirmed that Natalie was moving to a different neighborhood entirely, somewhere across town near her job. I felt relief that the landlord-tenant relationship would end cleanly and professionally. Natalie never caused problems after that initial confrontation in her apartment, which I respected despite our history. She could have made things difficult, but she chose to follow the rules and behave appropriately, and I appreciated that maturity, even though we'd never be friends. Ryan called me on a Tuesday afternoon to tell me he and Ashley had decided not to get married after all, but they were staying together and building a life on their own terms. He said they realized the engagement had been rushed and influenced by Natalie's expectations, and they wanted to figure out their relationship without that pressure. He was maintaining boundaries with Natalie now and had a healthier relationship with his mother after some hard conversations. He sounded genuinely happy and clear-headed in a way I'd never heard during our marriage, like he'd finally figured out who he was separate from his family's control. I realized after that call that owning Natalie's building had turned out to be the catalyst for everyone in that family to face the truth. My unintentional power over her living situation forced her to behave differently, which allowed others to see the manipulation clearly when it wasn't hidden behind perfect performance. Sometimes the universe has a sense of irony that's almost funny. I never planned to own my ex-sister-in-law's apartment, never wanted that kind of power over her life, but it ended up being exactly what everyone needed to see reality. Thea and I started meeting for lunch monthly after that gathering, and we became genuine friends, separate from any connection to Ryan or his family. She was thrilled that Ryan was finally breaking free from the family dysfunction, and kept thanking me for starting the process. I told her Ryan did the work himself, that he made the choice to see the truth and change his patterns. I just happened to own the right building at the right time, and everything else was Ryan's own growth and effort. 3 weeks later, Waverly called me on the morning of Natalie's scheduled move-out. She asked if I wanted to be present for the final inspection, but I declined, telling her to handle it exactly like she would for any other tenant. Waverly texted me updates throughout the day as the movers cleared out furniture and Natalie handed over her keys. The final inspection revealed the apartment in perfect condition, every wall clean, every fixture working, not a single issue to document. Waverly sent photos showing the immaculate state of each room and confirmed that Natalie would receive her full security deposit within the required time frame. Her last text mentioned that Natalie had been professional and cordial during the walkthrough, almost subdued compared to her usual personality. The landlord-tenant relationship ended exactly as it should have, with proper procedures followed and no drama on either side. I felt satisfied that everything had been handled correctly from start to finish. The property management conference in Dallas came 2 months after Natalie moved out, and I flew there feeling more confident than I had in years. Walking through the convention center filled with other investors and property managers, I realized how much I had grown as a business person since the divorce. The panels on portfolio expansion and market analysis made sense in ways they wouldn't have before, and I found myself contributing to discussions with actual expertise. My divorce had forced me to focus completely on my own success, instead of trying to navigate family drama, and I had built something genuinely solid. Gavin met me for dinner after the first day of sessions, and we reviewed my current portfolio numbers over steak and wine. My properties were performing well above projections. My business reputation in the local real estate community was excellent, and my personal life had finally reached a place of peace. I went to bed that night in my hotel room feeling proud of who I had become through all the difficulty. 6 months after Natalie moved out, I was having lunch with Thea at our usual spot downtown when she mentioned that Natalie was in therapy. Thea had heard from a mutual friend that Natalie was actually working on her controlling behaviors and taking responsibility for the damage she had caused. Apparently losing her grip on Ryan and facing consequences she couldn't manipulate away had been a real wake-up call. Thea said Natalie's therapist was helping her understand the patterns that started after their father left, and how she had used control to manage her anxiety about abandonment. I told Thea I hoped the growth was genuine for everyone's sake, that real change would benefit the whole family. Part of me remained skeptical after years of watching Natalie manipulate situations, but I also knew people could change if they truly wanted to. Thea showed me photos on her phone from Ryan and Ashley's wedding the week before, a small ceremony at a garden venue with just close friends attending Natalie, and Emily hadn't been invited, which Thea said was a huge boundary for Ryan to set after a lifetime of putting his mother and sister first. The photos showed Ryan and Ashley looking genuinely happy and free, holding hands under an arch of flowers, laughing with their small group of guests. Ashley wore a simple white dress, and Ryan had on a gray suit, both of them relaxed in a way I never saw during my marriage to him. Thea said the ceremony had been beautiful and emotional, focused entirely on Ryan and Ashley's commitment to each other without any family drama or manipulation. I felt happy for them in a way I didn't expect, glad they were building something real together. My own relationship had developed into something serious over those same months, and I found myself falling in love again. My partner had healthy relationships with their family, respected boundaries naturally, and communicated openly about everything. We spent weekends exploring the city, cooking dinner together, talking about our goals and dreams without any hidden agendas. The contrast to my marriage with Ryan was so stark it almost felt unreal at first, like I was waiting for the manipulation to start. But it never did because my partner came from a functional family where people said what they meant and respected each other's independence. I felt grateful for the painful experience with Ryan's family because it taught me what healthy relationships should look like. Every dinner with my partner's parents showed me what normal family dynamics felt like. Every boundary they respected reminded me that I deserved better than what I had accepted before Gavin called me 3 months later about the second downtown building I had been considering for over a year. The owner had finally agreed to sell, and the numbers worked even better than our initial projections. I signed the purchase agreement in Gavin's office, expanding my investment portfolio significantly, with a property that would generate strong returns for decades. Gavin was thrilled with how the deal came together, telling me I had excellent instincts for finding undervalued properties in developing neighborhoods. I felt proud of building this success completely independently, creating a business that thrived beyond what I had imagined during those dark months of divorce. The building represented everything I had accomplished by focusing on my own growth, instead of trying to fix a broken family dynamic. Thea mentioned during our next lunch that Emily had finally started questioning her role in the family dysfunction after being excluded from Ryan's wedding. She was apparently in therapy too, working on her enmeshment with Natalie and the ways she had enabled toxic patterns for years. Thea said Emily's therapist was helping her see how she had used her children to meet her own emotional needs after the divorce, instead of building a healthy adult life. The whole family was slowly healing in ways Thea never expected to see, each person finally taking responsibility for their part in the dysfunction. I told Thea I was glad they were all getting help, that it would benefit everyone, especially Ryan and Ashley, as they built their marriage. Part of me wondered if things could have been different if this healing had happened during my marriage to Ryan, but I also knew the timing hadn't been right. Then I ran into Natalie at a coffee shop completely by accident on a Tuesday morning 3 months later. We both froze when we saw each other, her hand stopping halfway to the cream and sugar station, my feet planted in the doorway. The moment stretched awkwardly as other customers moved around us, ordering drinks and finding tables. Then Natalie walked over to me slowly, her face showing none of the manipulation or fake warmth I remembered. She asked if we could talk for just a minute, and I nodded, curious about what she wanted to say. We stood near the window while she apologized sincerely for everything she had done to destroy my marriage, her voice quiet and steady. She said therapy had helped her see how toxic her behavior had been, how she had hurt everyone around her, including Ryan, by trying to control his life. Natalie took full responsibility without making excuses or trying to justify her actions, admitting she had been cruel and manipulative because of her own issues. I listened to her apology without interrupting, watching her face for signs of the old manipulation, but seeing only genuine remorse. When she finished, I told her I was accepted her apology, but made clear that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation or friendship between us. She nodded immediately, saying she understood, and wasn't asking for anything beyond acknowledgement that she recognized the harm she had caused. We stood there another moment in silence, then said goodbye and went our separate ways. I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected from that brief conversation, like a chapter of my life had finally ended properly. My partner proposed on the rooftop of my downtown building 4 months later, on a clear evening with the city lights spreading out below us. We had gone up there for what I thought was just a casual dinner, the building manager having set up a small table with candles at my partner's request. When they got down on one knee and pulled out a ring, I started laughing at the irony that the property which exposed Natalie's manipulation was now the site of my new beginning. I said yes immediately, pulling them up to kiss me while the city sparkled around us. Life had a funny way of working out, taking the place where everything fell apart and turning it into where everything came together. We stayed on that rooftop for hours, talking about our future and making plans for a life built on honesty and mutual respect. I thought about how far I had come from that day. I showed up at Natalie's door with inspection paperwork, how much I had grown and healed. The building beneath us represented not just financial success, but personal triumph, proof that focusing on my own growth had led me exactly where I needed to be. 3 weeks after the proposal, my phone lit up with Ryan's name for the first time in months. I stared at it for a moment before answering, wondering what he could possibly want now. His voice came through warm and genuine, congratulating me on the engagement because Thea had told him the news. He said he was really happy for me, that I deserved someone who appreciated me fully and put me first. There wasn't any bitterness or resentment in his tone, just honest happiness for my new chapter. He told me he'd been working hard in therapy and finally understood how badly he'd failed me during our marriage. I thanked him for calling and told him I appreciated how much he'd grown since the divorce. We kept it brief and cordial, ending the call on good terms, and I felt grateful that he'd reached that point of genuine self-awareness. It was the closure I hadn't realized I still needed from him. The wedding planning started immediately after that call, and I threw myself into it with pure excitement. My partner and I met with vendors, toured venues, and made decisions together with equal input and enthusiasm. Their family welcomed me completely, inviting me to dinners and including me in conversations without any of the manipulation or exclusion I'd experienced with Ryan's family. Their mother learned my coffee order after one visit and always had my favorite pastries ready when I came over. Their sister asked genuine questions about my business and actually listened to the answers instead of looking for ways to undermine me. The contrast between this warm, healthy family dynamic and what I'd endured with Emily and Natalie made me appreciate my new life even more. Every planning session felt joyful instead of stressful, because everyone involved actually wanted to celebrate our happiness. My partner's parents offered to help with costs, but respected our boundaries when we said we wanted to handle it ourselves. Nobody tried to take over the planning or push their own vision onto our wedding. Thea called asking if she could help with the wedding planning, and I immediately said yes. She showed up to our next planning meeting with a notebook full of ideas and vendor recommendations from her own daughter's wedding years ago. We spent hours together going through details, and she became an invaluable part of the process. One afternoon, while we were addressing invitations, she joked that she was finally getting to celebrate a wedding in her family that wasn't built on manipulation and control. I laughed and told her she was family to me now, regardless of my divorce from Ryan. She got teary and hugged me, saying she'd always hoped I'd stay in her life somehow. Thea helped me choose flowers, gave honest opinions on dress options, and even hosted my bridal shower at her house. She told stories about watching Ryan grow up and admitted she'd always known Natalie's behavior was toxic, but hadn't known how to stop it. I appreciated her honesty and her genuine support during this happy time. The wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in June with clear skies and warm sunshine. I stood in the bridal suite surrounded by friends who'd supported me through the divorce and this new relationship, all of them helping with final touches and keeping me calm. My partner's family filled the venue with laughter and love, creating an atmosphere of pure celebration. Thea sat in the front row beaming with pride, and even my own parents looked happier than I'd ever seen them at my first wedding. As I walked down the aisle toward my partner, I realized that Natalie's attempts to destroy my first marriage had actually pushed me toward this better life. I owned a successful property business that kept growing. I had real friendships with people who genuinely cared about me, and I was marrying someone who valued me completely and put our relationship first. The revenge of living well wasn't just a saying, it was my actual reality now. Everything I'd built since the divorce, from my thriving business to these authentic relationships, proved that sometimes the best response to manipulation is simply succeeding without the manipulators in your life. And that's where we'll stop. I like when stories remind us of small things that still matter. If it helped you reflect or learn something, that's what counts.